Today I'm going to show you how I go from raw wood to my absolute favorite water resistant finish. Whether you're making a countertop, a bar top, or any type of wood surface that will be subject to water, this is the video for you. What's going on, guys? So I make a lot of bathroom vanities, and I make quite a few with wood countertops. And when you're mixing wood with water, you got to take some extra precautions to preserve the wood. So I just wanted to make a quick video on how I get this from just raw wood. In this case, this is walnut butcher block. I know a lot of people use butcher block. Maybe you got a wood slab you want to make into a countertop, so I figured maybe it'll be a helpful video. I've had great success with this technique I'm going to show you, but most importantly, first and foremost, the wood that you are going to be using needs to be dry. Now, this is butcher block bought from Home Depot, just walnut butcher block. So I know butcher block bought from Home Depot or Lowe's or any place like that, this is gonna be dry. If you're buying a slab from some Joe Schmo off of Facebook Marketplace, you're gonna wanna make sure that that slab is dry. I don't care what they tell you. I don't care if he says this has been drying for 4 years. There's guys out there that will saw these 6 months ago and tell you it's been drying for a long time. So you're gonna want them, if they got a moisture meter, to prove to you that it's dry. Get yourself a moisture meter or find somehow, some way to make sure that that is dry, because you will run into all kinds of issues if not. So first and foremost, start with dry wood. Okay, so up until this point, what I've done is cut this to size for the vanity I'm using it for. Now what I'm going to want to do is I need to cut the sink hole in this as well as the faucet hole before I do any type of finishing and all that. Now, the finishing technique I'm going to show you in this video is going to be a really good balance between protection and looks. So it's still going to look like wood, but it's going to give you adequate protection as well. If you wanted the most protection possible, you could douse this thing in epoxy, and that's going to be your most durable finish for water. If I'm using wood, I personally do not like dousing it in epoxy. It just basically looks like a layer of glass over it, and the finished product does not really look like wood. So when I'm using a wood countertop, the finish I'm going to show you here is the finish I prefer. It's still going to have the wood look, the wood feel, but it's going to give you protection as well. So when it comes to wood finish, the worst thing for it is sitting water. So the next thing you're going to want to address is any natural cracks or knots or any defects in the wood. Those are going to need to be filled, because if sitting water were to seep into a knot, say, it's going to basically deteriorate the finish from the inside out. And there's no really good way, if water gets down in there, for it to evaporate, for you to wipe it up. So that's the next thing to take care of, is fill any cracks or voids in the wood. After your wood filler's dry, you can move on to your first round of sanding, which I always start at 80 grit, and I do the old pencil trick. Cover the whole surface with pencil lines to make sure you're sanding evenly, and I sand the whole surface until the pencil lines have disappeared. Also make sure you do the side and the end grain as well. 80 grit's going to really take out any major scratches, as well as get rid of the wood filler as well. After the 80 grit, I will repeat that same exact process, but I will do it with a 120 grit sandpaper. At this point, I'll also usually round over the sharp corners on the sides of the countertop, either with a round over bit or a chamfer bit. If you don't have a router, I would at minimum definitely sand the corners to make them a smoother finish so they're not so sharp. Once all that is done, we're going to want to sand one more time, but what we're going to want to do first is spray the top with water. What this is going to do, they call it water pop. Basically douse it in water really lightly. It doesn't need to be drenched. And what this will do is raise any loose wood fibers, and then once it's dry, you'll sand that off on the final sanding, and this will give you a lot smoother finish. When I first started, I never did this step, and trust me, it makes a huge difference. At this point, you can take a rag and wipe off any dust, and you'll be ready to start applying finish. The finish I like to use in this is Waterlux Original. It is a tung oil finish, and it is extremely durable. I'll link it below. It's right on Amazon. It's not the cheapest finish, but it is well worth it. And what I like to do is pour a little bit in a separate container, just a little cup, and I like to apply it with just an old t-shirt, hand rubbed style. That's just my favorite way to apply finish. I feel it gives you a lot more control, and you can really control how much you're putting on at a time. I do like to use gloves when applying this, and another thing to mention is that it has a really strong odor. It's not a bad smell, I don't mind it, but you might want to wear a mask as well. And another thing I would like to say is this is not sponsored by Waterlux. It's just my experience with it. I have used a lot of different finishes for my bathroom vanity tops, and this I have found to be the best. And what I'll first do is apply the finish to the bottom of it. You want to seal up the bottom. I won't put as many. I'll put one heavy coat on the bottom, and then I'll flip it over. And the top is where I'll start layering some light thinner coats. And your first couple coats are going to absorb in quite a bit. So I just like to rub it on. You honestly can't really mess this up unless you put it on too heavy to begin with. So I like to just do light coats in the beginning. The directions will tell you to do 24 hours between coats. For the first 2 or 3 coats, I don't wait 24 hours. This absorbs in relatively quickly. So honestly, on the first day, I will probably do 2 or 3 coats every 3 hours or so. And you'll see between each coat, the first coat will suck into the wood fibers quite a bit. And then you'll put on another coat, and it'll suck in a little more, but it'll be a little more of a sheen. And in each coat after that, you'll just keep adding sheen and build it up. And also, when you do those first couple rounds of coats, add at least 1 or 2 more coats on the bottom of the countertop as well. You want it pretty sealed up on the bottom too. And then the next day, I'll give it a light sanding, usually about 320 grit. And this is when I'll start applying finish every 24 hours. I'll probably do an additional 2 or 3 coats. I'll feel it out. A lot of time with this butcher block is a lot of the pieces of wood come from different trees. And you'll actually see some pieces of wood absorb in a lot more than others. You'll have one piece that's glossy, and then another piece next to it where it's kind of absorbed into the wood grain. So you kind of just want to apply as many coats as needed until it's a really even sheen across the whole thing. I believe I did 3 more, which was another 3 days. And with each coat that I do after the first day, I do sand very lightly with 320 grit. This just gives you the best finish. The directions say you do not need to sand between coats, but on at least your final 2 coats, I do recommend doing it, as it leaves a much smoother finish in the end. And be sure after you do that light sanding to wipe the dust completely off of it before you apply the next coat. Use either a tack cloth or a microfiber cloth and make sure you get that dust off. And once you're pretty happy with the sheen, once it's really even, I always do one more very light coat. And on your final coats, another thing to mention is after you get it all on there, once the top has the finish on, take your t-shirt or rag or whatever you're using and just run it with the grain across the whole thing. This will give you a nice even finish. So yeah, once you're happy with it, wait 24 hours and this top is going to be ready to install. Now, as you'll see, this does leave quite a glossy sheen. It's nowhere near as glossy as epoxy would be, but it will have a little bit of a shine to it. If you want more of a duller, matter finish, you can use a very, very fine steel wool with the steel wool with the 4 zeros, and you can rub that sheen out. I tend to not do this as the sheen is kind of what repels water. So I think it adds a layer of protection if you leave the sheen there, but just know you can dull this. That right there is my go-to finish for anything that has to do with wood countertops, anything that's going to be around a sink. I think it looks great and gives you a really good balance from the feel of wood, but also applying a lot of protection without using the shiny glossy epoxy. So thanks for watching, guys. Hope it helped, and I'll see you in the next video.